Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Corporate Policy Development and Scrutiny Panel today, the 3rd of April 2023. We have a call-in of decision E3452, Wansdyke Business Centre, Midsummer Norton. So item number one, this meeting is being webcast. Anyone speaking that does not wish to be filmed should make themselves known to the camera operator, please. 2, may I ask the Democratic Services Officer to read out the emergency evacuation procedure.
When the continuous alarm bell sounds, you must evacuate the building by the designated exits. The designated exits are signposted and arrangements are in place for the safe evacuation of disabled people.
Thank you. May I please have the apologies for absence and substitutions?
Apologies from Councillor Hughes, who's been substituted by Councillor Walker. Apologies from Councillor Furrs, who's been substituted by Councillor McCabe.
Thank you very much. Now, item number 4, are there any declarations of interest from the panel? No declarations of interest from the panel. Thank you. Number 5 is urgent business. There is no urgent business today. Item number 6, members of the public and councillor statements. Can I please remind you that you have 3 minutes each, and we're not using the traffic light system, but Michaela will be monitoring and we'll give you a 1-minute warning. So, Councillor Hughes.
Thank you. So I also declare my interest in terms of I'm a councillor for the ward. I'm also a resident in the ward, and I'm also a tenant in the business centre. So the business centre has been in Midsummer Norton for around 30 years, and in that time it's provided much needed affordable serviced office space, primarily for new and small businesses. This has been hugely successful. That is until 5 years ago, when Baines Council decided to manage the business centre themselves. Since then, there have been no new tenants have been permitted to move into the building, no marketing of the available offices, no response to potential tenant requests, no impact assessment on the local community or business needs, no assessments against our climate emergency policy goals, no assessment of our post-pandemic office space and hot desking needs, and no attempt to find a provider to continue the serviced office space, including myself. Management of the centre under the Business and Skills Department has been disastrous, as they have clearly lacked both the experience and the skills required to manage serviced office space. Through the aggressive approach taken by the property services during the recent months, several offices have been vacated. However, there are plenty of companies looking for space, and these seem to have been ignored. There is huge demand locally and little available. I have been trying to buy some industrial space locally for years without success, as the majority of premises are owned by a couple of large property landlords and investment companies. The result is, as local companies evolve or expand, they are forced to move out of Baines to areas such as Bristol, and of course they take their job opportunities with them. For businesses like Divine Healthcare, who are currently also a tenant in the building, this is a big problem, as they need to be close to the elderly residents that they support. The new Soma Valley Enterprise Zone and the newly proposed 51 units industrial estate further demonstrates the huge amount of demand locally. However, they will not be available for up to 10 years. So what is Baines' commitment to support businesses in the interim? The answer is simply nothing. We claim that we have a climate emergency agenda, but we force our residents and businesses to commute out of the area. We claim that one of the problems with this business centre is a requirement for investment, and that's a barrier, which is surprising because, as in my 28 years as a tenant, all the tenants have been happy with the current level and simply need affordable, functional, no-frills office space. For decades, Baines have consistently neglected the business needs of Midsummer Norton area, And only now have you started only now that you've covered your industrial areas in Bath with apartments, nursing homes and student accommodation, have you started to consider the Somer Valley?
Can you summarise now, please? Time's up.
We need a more considered approach to supporting employment in our region. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hughes. Can I now move on to Councillor Jackson? I understand that you would like to make a statement. Yes, it's your turn. Oh. Apologies, yes, of course. Who would like to ask a question? Councillor Dogood.
Councillor Hughes, so do you think going forward that the centre does need investment in terms of the accommodation or not?
No, I think it's fully functional as it is. All the tenants that I've spoken to in the time that I've been there, there's never been an issue with either the level of decor or the quality of the accommodation. It's perfectly adequate for the needs and the price range that it sits within. This is the sort of the Lidls of the office world. It's not a Harrods. And it suits its purpose.
Thank you. Anybody else like to ask some questions? Councillor Walker.
Councillor Hughes, you mentioned something in your statement about you buying the lease. Is that correct?
I have suggested several times that we have a conversation about how we can keep the unit running in its current form. But to be honest, nobody seems particularly interested in taking up that discussion. I have suggested that I would look at the possibility of buying the building or the lease or what, but to date no one's actually even bothered to even talk to me about it or even explain the current status of the building in terms of ownership.
Thank you.
Councillor Hodge.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Hughes. I just wondered, so we're down 2 tenants in the building now, and I just wondered what you thought the main reasons are for it being that situation.
Yes, so the occupancy level was, before Baines took control of the building again, was always very high. I would say normally in the 80% plus. Since Baines has taken over, it's reduced year on year. There's not been any ability for any new tenants to move in. So there's only been the option for people to leave, not move in. A number of companies have made approaches about moving in and not been responded to. Even our Somer Valley radio station were interested in taking 4 offices. That and the fact that we've encountered a very aggressive approach from the property services department in Baines. So several businesses left as a result of that heavy-handed approach they took to tenants. But the short answer is that there has not been any option for anyone to move in, only move out.
Councillor Singleton.
Thank you. Councillor Hughes, you talk about these other companies having to move out, and many have moved out during the time you've been there. You also talked about the difficulty of finding alternative office provision locally. Have these other businesses been able to find suitable accommodation as far as you're aware?
So, Divine Healthcare have been looking for some time. Can't find anything at all that's suitable. So one of those companies moved to service office space up the road, which is full and has a waiting list. Another business has moved out to Frome, and another one has moved out to Bristol. That was the closest places they could find. I personally have been looking for industrial space for some years, in fact. And in fact, recently I did find 2 units locally, which I tried to buy, but immediately one of the larger companies swoop in and buy it. Industrial units are very popular, particularly with investment companies, because you can buy them cheap and the rents can be quite high. So we have a big problem in the area with availability of both office space and industrial space.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Hughes. as a matter of principle, is it your view that the council should subsidise office space, or is it your view that this office space shouldn't need subsidising? I'm just trying to clarify where you are on that.
No conversation, to my knowledge, has taken place to understand what the level could or should be to run the business without subsidy. No discussions happened with the tenants to understand what level of rents, with or without subsidy, would be acceptable to be able to run the business. We've not had any numbers, and to my knowledge, after several conversations over the last 5 years, I'm not sure the council even have certainly not been able to demonstrate to me the actual numbers of running the building in the first place. So it was really impossible to understand if a subsidy was required and how much it would be if it was.
Councillor McCabe.
You say a lot of businesses have left. Generally speaking, numbers, when people are crunching the numbers on office space and whether something breaks even, there's a percentage of usage, or it's 85% full, for instance. Do you think that is an achievable occupation level for this building?
Absolutely. It's, as I say, you have Porton House, which is where actually Business West, when they were kicked out of this building, moved to Porton House and run the same thing at Porton House. And Porton House has been very successful, but it has a waiting list. So we know that the demand exists. I know of 4 applications that would like to have office space in the building. We know that we have, in the pipeline, we have Soma Valley Enterprise Zone, which is going to take up to 10 years before it's actually available to be used. On the opposite side of the road, we have an application to create a new industrial unit for 51 units. So we know in the future we've got all of this, and we wouldn't be having those developments if there wasn't the demand in the area. The fact is that the majority of companies in the area, as they evolve, at the moment are moving out to find space to grow their businesses. So where Baines is losing business.
Thank you. Councillor Davis and then Councillor McPhee.
Yeah, Councillor Hughes, you just mentioned about Porton House. Would you say that it looks now at Porton House, which didn't look so tidy a little while ago, appears to be a lot more upmarket? Well, I don't mean a Harrods level of upmarket, but I mean more upmarket than a little while ago, because it's attracted more business in there now. As I know I passed it actually only today myself, and it struck me looking better, but I just didn't know if that was your view as well, if that's where stuff has moved from where you are now to there.
I think I've not been in there recently, so I know it's been very successful, and I know they've had a lot of demands. And I think, obviously the revenue stream has helped them to develop some very nice office space. I guess that demonstrates again that if you have the right levels of occupancy, you should be able to generate the funds to be able to make it work viably without subsidy.
Councillor McPhee.
I thought that there was some issue about not having enough windows in your facility, and that was why Baines was a bit doubtful about selling it as serviced accommodation.
So as the building has evolved, so the upstairs was open plan. It used to be, half of it used to be council and half of it used to belong to the local college. As it's evolved, more offices have been created as demand increased. 2 of the offices are in the centre of the building rather than are on the periphery. So everyone on the periphery has windows looking out. There are 2 offices in the centre. And offices, there's horses for courses. Some people, it has windows, they just don't look out of the building, which is not unusual for office space. In fact, they have windows on every side, but they just don't look out of the building. Just to give you an example, one of the offices was taken by Uber, the taxi firm, and actually they were never there. They didn't care if the office had windows or not. Other companies are just looking for something that has more storage than anything. So the two offices you're talking about have a use and can obtain a rent, yes.
Any more questions? No? Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Hughes. Right, Councillor Jackson, we'll move on to you now. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed for letting me speak today. I, of course, was one of the signatories to the call-in. I suggested to the independent group that this decision be called in because I sensed another sell-off of the family silver. And the problems of disposing of our residents' resources is that this council can only benefit once from such a sale, and it loses the potential for income generation in the future. And of course that's what Councillor Hughes has been talking about, the potential for income generation in future. From the officer's report, it seems that the premises have been neglected, that modernisation and refurbishment would not be cost effective, and that business needs have changed since the centre was created in 2004. It is portrayed as a misplaced subsidy, a white elephant. Planning policy and economic development policy are all about context, and this is partly why the decision in the paper is mistaken. The site is not 25 minutes walk from both Radstock and Norton. It might take me 25 minutes, in fact I've done it in 25 minutes, but I'm quite severely disabled. A fit person could manage it in 15 easily, and there is actually at the moment a bus service running past this site. It's, the main point though is that it lies on the Greenway cycle track, and 10 minutes along the urban park, which is being created, has you at the Soma Centre and the centre of Midsummer Norton. 10 minutes uphill, and you're in the so-called Nightingale estate in Westfield, where there is another doomed office programme. It's far better connected than Old Mills or the proposed 54 industrial units in Langley Lane, Poulton. Active travel, we hear all the time. Please take active travel as a concept seriously because it applies to this site. The local plan policy update and other council policies require developers to take account of the climate emergency. Yet this administration is proposing to build units or permit development on greenfield, not only encouraging urban sprawl, but causing ecological damage and increasing the traffic in the narrow lanes around the A362 to dangerous levels. Without prejudice to any planning application that may come forward, I would like to say that Gordon Brown's government had it right. Brownfield development should take precedence. And if the Soma Valley Economic Zone and the Langley's Lane application are viable propositions, surely this one could be. This area, Norton, Radstock and Westfield, is white van man country. Small businesses start up in people's back bedrooms and are successful and grow and need affordable premises and the rising costs of heating and so on. And surely this site could be made to work, as Councillor Hughes argues. And then there would be a chance to reduce out-commuting and thus our carbon footprint.
Councillor Jackson, could you bring your remarks to a close, please? You've had over 3 minutes. Fine, if they're quick.
There's no mention of the need for stable broadband, fast broadband in this area, which this block could provide. Finally, the shortage of office accommodation is so acute that when Westfield Parish Council needed to find new offices, all we could do was make plans to build our own office block, which we will do. But that tells you how severe the need is. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Does any of the panel have any questions for Councillor Jackson? Councillor Walker.
Councillor Jackson, so obviously this council declared a climate emergency in 2019. Do you believe that the on-site business centre is a sustainable business park for those commuting, so walking, cycling and taking away the need for motor transport?
Most definitely. We see people coming up from Frome to work on their bikes to work in this area. It's a very good cycle network, and that's carbon neutral.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have any questions for Councillor Jackson? Councillor McCabe.
Councillor Jackson, do you accept that any company could site itself in this block and have its workers cycle?
Sorry, I can't hear.
Do you accept that any company could take over this block and have their workers cycle and walk from the surrounding area? And a second question is, Council currently subsidising this office block. Is there a limit to the amount of money that you would place on how much subsidy the Council should provide for an office block like this?
If I can start with the second question first, I would say this block needs a very thorough survey to make it more passive house level. I mean, to reduce its outgoings in heating and checking its insulation, making it much more conformable to our post-2019 standards. I'm familiar with the building. I've often been to meetings there up until the time of COVID. It's very comfortable, very nice. And the local, as you probably know, the local free newspaper used to operate out of it. So I'm sure it could be done if the political will and the competence is there. What gets me very, very twitchy is when we have high ideals about climate emergency, carbon neutrality and so on, but the actual practicalities sort of don't get done. Now I've forgotten what your first question was.
The first bit of the question was that actually any company could come in and fulfil all your requirements through the market rather than subsidised by the council. Would you agree with that statement?
It's a bit of a tricky one because you're wanting to encourage new businesses to start up. I've got units in Westfield in dire Victorian accommodation. They might jump in. But I really couldn't say about more advanced developing countries, companies. What I do know is that in Westfield we have a resource of skilled people with a lot of ingenuity who could really make this site work.
Anybody else on the panel have any questions for Councillor Jackson? No? Thank you very much for your statements, both Councillor Hughes and Councillor Jackson. Councillor Hughes, may I ask you, as you have a pecuniary interest in this, that you withdraw?
I'm sorry, I think I started my statement by telling you that I'm the ward councillor, a resident and a tenant of 28 years in the building. What else would you like to know?
Well, I think, Chair, if you've made a disclosable pecuniary interest this morning, or this afternoon rather, now you've made your statement and answered the questions, the Code of Conduct requires you to leave the room.
Is this a public meeting, or have we gone into a closed session?
It's a public meeting.
So how can I view the meeting if I leave it as a member of the public?
Well, you've made a disclosable, as a councillor, you've got a disclosable pecuniary interest which you've declared, and therefore the code requires you to leave.
Okay, but it's a public meeting. I don't quite understand. So I'd sit out there and watch it on YouTube, is what you're telling me?
Well, yes, that's the way it is, I'm afraid. It's a matter for you whether you stay, but if you stay, you're exposing yourself to the possibility that somebody might want to make a complaint under the Code of Conduct, and all the rest of it.
Sorry, okay.
Yes,
if you want me to leave, that's fine, but I will be checking this out, because I don't quite see how, as a member of the public, a resident, a tenant, that I can't sit in a public meeting as any other member of the public or any other tenant would be allowed to do.
It's a matter for you, Councillor.
It's a matter for you to explain the rules to me. And if that's the rule that you would like to apply, then that's fine.
It's the Code of Conduct, it's the Localism Act.
But, you know, it's a matter for you whether you stay or you leave. But what I'm saying is, if you stay, you leave yourself open to complaints. Okay? Thank you. But you're right, you can leave and watch it on YouTube.
So can I just ask Colin Blackburn, you had a point to make?
Yeah, I was just really an order of proceedings, Chair. I've done a number of call-ins previously, and usually the person doing the call-in gets their statement first before the additional speakers speak. And Councillor Hughes was not a signatory to this call-in. He won't know what I've got to say about this, and I'm surprised actually that I wasn't given that 5 minutes to start with and do my prepared bit before it goes on to the others, because that's the normal running order I've experienced previously with call-ins.
Councillor Jackson, you had a point to make.
Well, I do, because we live in a democracy. It is a basic human right to be able to make your voice heard in a democratic forum. The members here were all elected by their representatives, as was he. And I'm afraid I would be invoking, if I had the right amount of electronic equipment here, the UN Charter on Human Rights 1948, because it seems to me that Councillor Hughes has a right. The fact somebody might make a complaint is hypothetical. On the other side of the balance sheet, he's got practical experience for 28 years of being a tenant of this building, and I would suggest that is of value to the council, and therefore he should remain.
The council solicitor has advised that Councillor Hughes withdraws, but if you wish to stay, that would be completely up to you.
So I'm not trying to cause any problems. I'm just here to represent the tenants, the building, the residents. So yeah, thank you.
Actually, Councillor Hughes doesn't have a right to speak after this, having made his statement and answered his questions. So it would be as a viewer, as it were. Right, so we'll move on to the main agenda item, and that is the call-in of decision E3452, Wanstead Business Centre, Midsummer Norton. I'm just going to quickly run through the order now, and then I will set out the options that the panel have on their decision-making. So we have a statement from the lead call-in member, which will be Councillor Blackburn, and that's up to 10 minutes. We have questions from the panel to the lead call-in member. I will then ask for a statement from the Cabinet member for Council House Building, Councillor Tom Davis, who will also have up to 10 minutes. Again, questions will then be put forward by panel members to the Cabinet member. There will be a closing statement from the Cabinet member, which is 5 minutes, and a closing statement from the lead call-in member. Just a reminder, whilst the panel is listening to the statements, our options for a decision are to dismiss the call-in. The decision shall then take effect immediately. The next option is to refer the decision back to the decision-making person or body for reconsideration, setting out in writing the nature of the panel's concerns, or finally, to refer the matter to council itself to undertake the role of the panel, which may necessitate an additional council meeting to meet necessary timescales. And just a note, the ultimate decision still will remain with the original decision maker. Okay. So, may I invite the lead call-in member, Councillor Blackburn, to make your statement. Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Why is Wanstead Business Centre important? For years, it has been a viable centre for employment, entrepreneurialism and business opportunity. It helps companies get established and others get a stable and respectable environment to operate from. Total Guide to Bath says, Wanstead Business Centre, situated in a thriving enterprise park with free parking, Wanstead Business Centre offers serviced office space, virtual offices and meeting rooms. this was a story only 5 years ago. After 15 years of effective management from Business West and real engagement with the business community and up-and-coming opportunities being created by new businesses in Baines. In 2014, Councillor Paul Crosley was considering investment in furthering the success story, and then Baines stepped in. In 2018, dispensed with the services of Business West, and sadly it's all come crashing down. No new tenants, no new businesses started or supported in a Baines property. It's all pretty sad, really. At no point in my 8 years as a councillor, as a member of PDS scrutiny panels, etc., have I heard about what we've been failing to achieve with this centre for opportunity. I was disappointed a couple of weeks ago to hear the Cabinet Member for Economic Development, Regeneration and Growth admit our authority's shortcomings towards supporting the business community. And then I heard this single member decision. So why? Are we getting £450,000 to hand back our lease early to the owners and hope we don't have to pay any dilapidations? That's maybe our property services department's normal modus operandi when giving our cash away, but no suggestion of that and no estimate of what we might get by selling this long lease onto the open market. Just a vain hope that it might create some new industrial space while ripping away the hope of new entrepreneurs and other SMEs who want to create employment, and thus forcing them out of our authority area to find suitable premises away from where they live, network and spend. Maybe we hope they will come into Bath, to all the space we have available in South Keys. But then we all know they can't afford that, couldn't find any workers locally either. Or are we thinking they might just do that and drive in and pay for parking in our council-owned car parks? Decisions made in haste allow us to repent at leisure, and we have many chances to do that in the way we have conducted ourselves over many years in Baines, with failure to do joined-up thinking and plan properly for the changing opportunities. This lease does not cost us anything annually. The cost of maintaining the premises for another couple of years is about the same as the disposal cost mentioned, and already we've identified tenants for at least 8 of the available units. So why are we jumping to this conclusion? Someone who operates businesses and who knows the pain of the last 3 years through COVID and Brexit having wreaked havoc with our economy and working environments, I care about growth. I care about the chance to create employment and the impact premises have on viability. I moved my company 4 times in 3 years in Bath, as premises for growth were hard to come by, hard to afford and hard to secure. I count myself as lucky here in Bath, as I had other options available to me and have now got over 10 years behind me on the journey to being viable and a sustainable business. Unfortunately, my business in Belfast has been hammered by bad government decisions, and I've closed down offices in Liverpool and Glasgow but I've been thrown a lifeline in Belfast by an enterprise centre backed by a local authority, and option 2 of the 4 options presented to the Cabinet Member are not representative of real life. I've accepted the switch from an inclusive model to a shared energy model, as all the tenants in that building have, to make it sustainable for all, taking collective responsibility for managed consumption. It certainly has improved attitudes towards efficiencies, but Baines have dismissed this out of hand with no evidence to back up their conclusions. Increasing rental levels. Why? If we can get it 85% let, even at current rent levels and without adding a full-time on-site staff cost, this would wash its face. It wouldn't need subsidy. At a time when we openly admit the current administration has not supported the business community, we're taking another decision based on flawed data and or a manipulated outcome. It has been clear that this facility is unloved and unwanted by property services, or is it the business and skills team wagging the dog on this one? Either way, it is wrong, does nothing to help us develop our communities, and can only add to, not reduce, our dependency on fossil fuel transport. I would urge you to engage with me, agree a plan for the next 24 months, and revisit the decision with a genuine market intelligence and a fair crack at making it successful and viable. Maybe this call-in decision should be taken after the upcoming elections to allow time to explore the alternatives to closure
and avoid subsidy. Thank you.
Thank you. Panel, I'll open up questions. Councillor Singleton.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I may have misheard you, but did I hear you say that you had identified tenants for 8 of the units? Could you clarify?
Yes. Over the last 2.5 weeks, I've tried to work out who owns the building, to understand what this lease is all about. And interestingly, our register is a bit of a mess on this one, because it doesn't look as if Baines actually own it. But I'll leave that to be looked at further. But in doing so, I'm trying to identify the companies that have tried to engage about taking space in that building. And there are people still interested, despite not getting communication, despite being rebuffed. You go on Google, temporary closed, it says. That's what it's been saying for ages. Why? It's because we've been putting people off. But genuinely, I can't say we'll get it 85% let in a few weeks, but I genuinely believe there's great business opportunities to take up space.
Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Dogood.
Councillor Blackburn, do you think this building would need to be refurbished going forward?
No, I don't. Personally, I've only been into the building once, into one of the offices, and it's certainly comparable with many I've been into in other places around the country. The business centre that I occupy over in Belfast, is it on a little scale? It's no different. And I genuinely think there is an opportunity that people are knocking at the door saying we would like to take space there without coming up with big plasma screens in the reception areas and things like that. It doesn't need that refurbishment level. I think we can prove that it can run without subsidy and maybe find an operator. We've got people like Tom, who runs the guild here as part of the guild hall, really engage with the business community to take it forward.
Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Walker.
So my question is, by keeping the building as it is and charging reasonable rent to encourage businesses to take up availability of the space and allow the businesses to run the building, do you believe this would be a savings to the council?
I haven't seen the figures, Councillor Walker, in terms of, I know it's not costing us anything for the lease because that's what's quoted in the papers. I see we're paying £3,000 towards our share of the upkeep of the commercial estate that's there, but no other figures are shown. So understanding the current rental yield at, say, 75-80% let, and making sure that that is covering its costs, it's understanding with a viable operator, does it need virtual offices, as it ran previously successfully for a number of years? Is that a market that's now needed post-COVID? I just think this hasn't been explored. This is a decision being taken seemingly without scrutiny, and it should absolutely financially require no subsidy if it's run correctly.
Right, Councillor McPhee.
No, I think maybe cross purposes. I believe that the paper is almost implying that we should surrender our long lease to the marketplace, i.e. sell it. It's not giving us any indication of what that potentially could yield, and whether that's to pay the Weckham Mayor back for the post office building we borrowed money from him for, I don't know. But if somebody takes that unit and converts it into an industrial unit, as almost is implied, that's going to take away multiple business opportunities from one single location. Whether that shed becomes somewhere where minimal employment actually is created, as I've seen in my own ward, where we've lost a thriving laundry that needed to move out of town because of the constraints of the site, and because we wanted to keep commercial space, we've now got a storage centre with less than four full-time employment jobs on it. So we've got to be careful what we're looking for business opportunity, and just surrendering the lease back to the market, I don't think is a good thing.
Councillor Elliott.
Can I just understand your point there a bit better, Councillor Blackburn? That if you're saying that you don't think it needs to be subsidised, but you're also saying you don't think that the market can support it, because you're saying you don't want it surrendered back to the market. This is, I'm just, the option appears to be surrender it back to the market so that the market can decide what it's worth, and you know. But if we're not going to subsidise it, then why not surrender it back to the market? That's the bit I'm not clear on.
But surrendering it back to the market is you're potentially offering just a shed on a long lease, because stripping it out and making it industrial, because it's implied in these documents that it would suit being industrial. As we've heard from Councillor Hughes and Councillor Jackson, industrial is in demand. Somebody takes that. There are two major property owners around that area. And going through land registry, one of them's an offshore trust. Don't know who the owners are, but they control that market. This goes into becoming a single shed, because if you surrender it to the market, you're not saying, would somebody like to either rent this off us or buy this lease off us as it is and operate it as a business centre. What you're saying is, buy that lease off us and do what you like with it.
Sure. Can I just follow up on that? So, yeah, sure, I understand, but it seems to me that you are then saying that there is some kind of market failure here that we need to intervene with, because if surrendering it back to the market isn't the right thing to do, you're saying that the market isn't working then. Is that right?
No, Councillor Elliott, what I'm saying is we have failed this business. This business centre has not been engaged correctly by the Baines team that have meant to be managing it for the last 5 years. They have not engaged with prospective tenants. They genuinely have not gone back and engaged with people. They've put people off wanting. So that seems like there's a different agenda going on. Run it down, get it to a point that we just pass it over. That's what it appears. It's been viable in that model up until 5 years ago. Let 85% plus. The operators of that centre have gone off down the road because they saw there was demand there. The potential to find an operator again, it needs to be explored, but that's not one of the options that seems to be on the table.
Okay. So you're saying there should be an additional option that hasn't been explored, which is find an operator?
We've clearly failed to manage it ourselves. I think there are people out there that we know, from Business West to the guy who runs the guild next door, who know how to operate these centres. They're happening in many places up and down the country with lots of effective operators. I mean, Newark Works is another type of example of this type of space. So why can't Midsummer Norton continue to have a thriving community that it had for a long time, but for the last 5 years, under our own management, we've allowed it to slip away?
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, are there any other questions from the panel? No. Councillor McPhee.
Just to continue the
Nice idea. I always believe decisions should be taken on data and facts, and exploring that opportunity before hamstringing ourselves to just say that's all we're going to do for the market.
Trying to figure out what's acceptable.
But that to me is a viable way of looking at an alternative to continue offering this to the business community of Midsummer Norton.
Any further questions for anybody? No further questions. Can I now invite the Cabinet Member for Council House Building, Councillor Tom Davis. You have up to 10 minutes. Councillor Davis.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you all for your time today. I'm here to represent the 2 Cabinet members who were involved in the decision, but unfortunately, due to prior existing commitments, neither was able to be here today for this meeting. I thought it might be helpful if I started first with a background to the centre and the decision being reviewed today. The Wandsdyke Business Centre in Midsummer Norton is a serviced office established in 2004 and now managed directly by the council. The building itself was formerly 2 light industrial units prior to being combined and converted for multiple office use. Specifically, it's important to note that the centre was designed to meet an historic failure in the market, specifically at the time for the provision of space for small and medium enterprises within the Soma Valley. In recent times, the market has developed to a position where it now provides a more broad range of property options for exactly these businesses, with additional provision in both the direct locality and surrounding market towns. Indeed, this has been evidenced by the fact that many of the previous tenants of the centre have now relocated to other such facilities. As of today, only 2 of the 19 separate serviced offices are occupied. Conversely, and as you've heard today, there is now very high demand for additional industrial space in Baines, as evidenced by the Alder King Market Monitor. As the decision paper makes clear, the centre has previously operated a model that requires a council subsidy of approximately £25,000 per year to continue as serviced offices. And I think it's important to clarify, from everything we've heard today, when there appears to be reference to a great historic past, this centre has always required a subsidy. Given that the centre has always required a subsidy, a review of options was rightly required to ascertain the following looking forward: the rental levels likely required for the centre to break even, what improvements would be needed to the centre to justify any rental increases, and whether continuing the current model of subsidising occupation is the most efficient and viable long-term use of public funds by the council. The resulting report focused on 4 options for the centre that were considered as part of the professional advice and guidance received, and these are detailed in Appendix 1 and are, as a reminder, Option 1, make the necessary improvements and estimate costs of renovating the business centre that could justify the minimum average rental levels. Option 2, do nothing, i.e. continue to subsidise, retain the minimum average rental levels with no major refurbishment taking place, only necessary works. Option 3 was the centre closure and the return of it to the market as office, industrial or warehouse accommodation, or Option 4, occupation by council staff. For Option 1, the rental levels necessary to break even on the centre were deemed excessive compared to local alternative accommodation, and you will have seen the financial evidence behind this. Option 2 required continued subsidies from the council to benefit a small number of businesses. Given that the council has limited resources and serves a total of more than 8,000 businesses in the district, a continued subsidy of at least £25,000 per annum, notwithstanding additional maintenance costs, was not considered the best value use of public funds for a relatively small number of companies. For Option 4, sufficient supply of officers are in place to meet the demands on the council staffing. Therefore, Option 3 was recommended, to dispose of the centre under vacant possession, returning the property to market as either office, industrial or warehouse accommodation. Looking further at the reasoning for recommending the centre's closure, I would note crucially that there is no longer market failure which justifies this public subsidy. There is more provision of suitable serviced office space in the locality and surrounding market towns, whilst further future provision is set to be developed, as you've heard. Furthermore, the investment necessary to improve the premises to support the operation and the expected rental levels does not provide a viable operating model and would necessitate continued council subsidy for the centre. Conversely, as you have heard today, there is a lack of supply of industrial accommodation in Midsummer Norton, and freehold or long leasehold properties are usually sold quickly to reflect demand. Returning the site to the market would retain employment and provide growth and/or move-on space for employers. Furthermore, the closure of the centre will reduce pressure on limited staff and financial resources in both the council's business and skills and property maintenance team. At a critical economic time for both the council and the local business community, these resources are required to support a wider range of businesses through financial training and skills measures. The recommended option has required some relocation of existing occupiers to suitable alternative location. To date, all former tenants of the centre have successfully found alternatives, and only 2 occupiers remain in the centre, and both have been offered tailored property options. Looking specifically at our response to the call-in and the narrative contained within, there's reference first to there not being the opportunity for elected members to scrutinise the proposal. Both Cabinet members who signed off on the decision on the proposed closure of the centre undertook due diligence in reviewing the evidence and the financial impact of the various options provided. Officers from both the business and skills and property team have explored all options to retain the centre. However, the economic case is not there. Moreover, the economic and employment impact of the centre closing could well be positive, given that the property will be retained for employment use, as you've heard. To date, all tenants that have exited the Wansdyke Business Centre since 2017 to seek alternative office accommodation have found suitable premises for their needs, while a small number of previous tenants have switched to running their business from home. Alternative office options remain available in the immediate and wider local area, as seen recently. Additional provision of new industrial and office space in the Somer Valley is coming forwards, which will achieve the dual benefit of growing the local economy and employment opportunities in the area, whilst responding to the climate emergency through their local provision. Secondly, there's the claim that there's no scrutiny of the financial implications. A copy of the exempted financial impact appendix has been made available to panel members, which clearly shows the financial risks and expected continued liabilities faced by the council should it retain the centre. Considering the limited resources available to the council's business and skills team, it has been deemed that retaining a subsidy is not the most effective use of public funds. Additionally, the financial model associated with breaking even would require rental values in excess of what is considered achievable given the centre's location and condition. The Council is committed to responding to the climate emergency, and option 3 would result in no net loss to employment space in the Somer Valley. And it is notable that several large employment sites, including Old Mills and the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone, are also being developed, alongside support for high-speed broadband connectivity throughout the area to enable home working and support for businesses, which has been, and home working option, as you heard earlier, has also been deemed appropriate for some of the previous tenants. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Panel, who would like to ask Councillor Davis questions? Councillor McCabe.
Thank you. I think the most serious accusation that's been levelled at us is that we've managed this site down. Do we have any further data on how many approaches we've had, how those approaches have been dealt with?
So I heard reference earlier to a reference that 8 tenants had been identified recently for the council. I have checked. I understand that none of those 8 have approached the council directly. I think the reason why I stressed the point about the fact that the unit has always required subsidy is exactly, I think, to combat that point that somehow the change in it being run by the council has resulted in this subsidy being introduced through mismanagement of the council. That's not the case. The centre has always required subsidy. Now, what I would maintain is it was absolutely appropriate that that subsidy was in place in the early years. There was a market failure. The council was stepping in to support the provision of needed office space for potential employers in our area. That need and that market failure, and therefore the resulting requirement and justification for public subsidy, no longer exists in this site.
Anybody else got any questions? Councillor Diggard.
Yeah, the other thing that's been said in the statements is that it seemed to be one way, that people would leave. In fact, 23 out of 25 have left, but no new applicants were taken on. Was this an active policy, or was this because nobody came forward? I mean, Councillor Blackburn's referred to these 8, but are we saying that it was still being marketed and no one came forward, or are we saying, well, actually, we weren't taking anyone else on? Was it deliberate or was it non-deliberate?
Councillor, if I can just, I'm sorry I had to consult then, you can understand, I just wanted to make sure I was giving the right information. My understanding is that there was a period where the leases were being regularised, so that every tenant would be put on a new lease, and during that period, new tenants weren't brought into the building. And by the time my understanding is by the time those leases were regularised, if I'm correct here, in a sense, the market had moved on and alternative locations being found for tenants, and the market had continued to provide for alternative locations for serviced offices. Is that correct? Yeah.
Councillor Walker.
So, in your statement, you said the council tried to help those 2 tenants left to find alternative accommodation. Is that suitable to their needs?
I think those conversations are ongoing, but I think what I would suggest is my understanding is that there isn't anything unique about this serviced office provision that couldn't be provided by something else in the area, and one of the 2 has already found somewhere suitable. I've just been informed.
So can I just come back on that? So Councillor Hughes was offered a shop in the Hollies which was not suitable for his business needs. So he's not actually being helped in the right area of need.
So my understanding is that he obviously sits as one of those 2. One of them has now been resolved. The other one clearly hasn't yet been resolved satisfactorily to Councillor Hughes's satisfaction.
Does anybody else? Councillor McPhee and then Councillor Hodge. Councillor McPhee, do you have your microphone on?
One point made by Councillor Blackman was if it goes to an industrial option, storage or whatever, then your employment goes down and there's perhaps only one tenant or 2 tenants. How do you feel about that, restricting it slightly so that it goes, initially at least, for serviced accommodation?
I think my understanding is that the way in which it's proposed that it would go to market is in part to secure the best outcome from a financial perspective, but even on the lowest employment outcome or projected outcome for any of those uses, we'd be looking at between 10 and 50 employment opportunities within it. I appreciate that's quite a wide range.
Yeah.
Councillor Hodge.
Sorry, can I just follow up on Councillor Duguid's question? I might have missed the detail. Can I just be clear from what date? Is it from when the council took over from Business West 2018 that new potential occupants coming forward haven't been able to progress their interest in office space? Is it from 2018, which is when the tenant leases were being regularised, which was 5 years? I have a second question of that.
Sorry, Councillor, just make sure we've got the right date. Yeah, it was from 2018. Yeah.
Okay. So nobody coming forward interested since 2018 could take that forward. Okay, that's the case. Yeah. And the second question is in our general report that we received. So this question of subsidy and its importance, isn't it? So a council subsidy of up to 25,000 approximately per annum to continue the service. I just wondered, so more of a feeling of what have the subsidy figures been? Is there an average, or what were they before 2018? What would have been a typical subsidy? Is this figure of 25 a typical, or is it an up to? Do you have the subsidy figures each year?
We believe it's always been a minimum of 25,000. We had to subsidise Business West by £25,000.
And then after that, it's continued at that level, has it? 2018, 19, 20, about that sort of level. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Councillor McCabe.
Yes, whilst I can appreciate why one might want to enjoy the benefits of subsidised office space, what other have officers identified other expenditure that for that around 25,000 a year that they'd rather be supporting businesses with?
I think, as I referred to in my statement, there are 8,000 businesses in Bath and North East Somerset, and the team do some remarkable work with the limited resources they have given, including a very significant amount of universal business support and individual support for companies in the area. There is no end to the additional support that the team would wish to provide. 25, if you consider the number of businesses impacted and supported by that subsidy and what could be done with the subsidy for a far larger number of potential employers in the area, with the total figure of 8,000 businesses in the area, I think the short answer is there's lots of things that the team have identified they could be using the subsidy for elsewhere.
Panel members have any other questions? So I just had a couple of questions. Can I just ask, this 25,000 subsidy, what sort of rate of occupancy? Are you still talking about 85%, which is obviously mentioned in the papers?
I think there's two aspects to that. One, that the council, whilst £25,000 has been the historic minimum subsidy, as tenant numbers fell, we sought to cut costs further in order to make sure we control the subsidy at around that level. So, for example, I think there's reference in the paper to the on-site provision of some staff being removed, and that was part of an example of trying to cut the costs to manage the subsidy level, because through not wishing it to increase, you'll be aware that in the exempt appendix there's some reference to what it looks like looking forward with regards to the level of subsidy that might be required under option 2.
And sorry, could you just remind me, I'll have a look, under option 2 is, so that is for the grade A option.
Grade A is do nothing.
Yeah, so that's going to still rise up. Now, in the original call-in, I think there was a question regarding economic financial impact on the community. Were you able to do any research around that?
Sorry, I'm just making sure that I understand what specific bit we're responding to. Was that in the call-in?
I believe that that was part of the question, but I'll defer to the lead call-in member. That there was a point regarding economic impact on the community, and obviously climate.
Yeah, I certainly, towards the final part of my speech, I was responding specifically to the aspects contained within the call-in, so I felt I'd spoken to that point. So I've got the full narrative of the call-in here, and I think in my response I talked to that, not least of all the point about the economic and employment impact of the centre could actually well be positive, given that the property is being retained for employment use and given the current number of people using the centre and that balance.
Also, just in terms of the companies moving out, you mentioned that, but I think it was Councillor Hughes that made the point that a lot of people had moved outside Baines. Do you have any research or data surrounding that?
Yeah, I have. So, to be clear, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got the data regarding the last 7 that have moved out. 3 of those have moved to Poulton House in Midsummer Norton. 1 has moved to Bath. I beg your pardon, I've got a total for 9, because 2 have moved to working from home as well. So 2 have moved to working from home, 3 have moved to Midsummer Norton, 1 has moved to Bath, and 2 have moved to Frome. And there is another one that has an undisclosed office address, but they retain an office elsewhere in Bath and North East Somerset. So I think if I've got that correct, from the 7 where they've gone to a non-residential address, 4, 5, at least 4 are still in Bath and North East Somerset.
Okay, great, thank you very much. Panel members have any other questions? Councillor Hodge and then Councillor McCabe.
Sorry, I just want to be clear on the subsidy thing one more time. I'm just confused. The paper says up to, but it now seems it's a minimum of 25,000. Was the subsidy the same when it was run by Business West and had quite a good occupancy, as it is every year since then when it has had only 2 occupants? I would have thought there would be a change. I would have thought it'd be more now and less previously. But is it always required that? Just to have a feel for the figures.
No, I understand. The level of the subsidy was was managed by, in the latter years, cutting costs. So there's reference in the paper to the fact that the staff provision, for example, is dropped. In fact, at one point I think even removed. So that's the way in which the costs were managed with the falling occupancy level. But the subsidy paid over was £25,000 when it was previous to the council running it. Yeah.
Okay. Can I just be clear that if the council...
Sorry, Councillor McCabe, have you got your mic on?
I have. So I can. Can I be clear that if the council thought that there was still an under-provision of this sort of space in the market, that we wouldn't have this paper in front of us, and that the council is absolutely convinced that the market is providing locally this sort of space?
All the evidence that the council has in front of it at the moment is that there is no market failure in this area, and therefore use of a subsidy is not appropriate. I appreciate there were some other sort of hypotheticals, if you like, in your question, but fundamentally, in the absence of a market failure, which we deem there is not anymore a market failure, it is not appropriate for public funds to be used to subsidise this offering.
Can I just ask you, please, about the reports that obviously you reference? You've got the Mickledore Flexible Workspace, and that was the Somer Valley Enterprise Zone final report, October 2019. You've then got the Lambeth Smith Hampton report on the Wansdyke Business Centre Options Assessment, and that was January 2020. The world is a very different place since those two reports were issued. Were there any updates done on those?
There was a desktop exercise where the council's has updated some of these figures to national reviews, I understand. One being specifically, I beg your pardon, to our local market industrial review that we've updated the papers for. I think also, I would also just make reference to some of those recent tenancy moves that I've been talking about being recent, and that still being the dynamics of the market as we're seeing it at the moment with regards to alternative provision being there.
My final question, I think, is the market monitor. Did you just get one agent in, or did you get a number and then take averages?
I'm informed we had two taken.
Thank you very much. Does anybody else have any questions? Councillor Davis? No? Thank you very much, Councillor Davis. So, may I now ask you to sum up, make your closing statement for 5 minutes, or up to 5 minutes, please, Councillor Davis.
I won't use the full 5 minutes. I think what I'd like to do is just focus on what I see as the key sort of consideration for this decision. I ultimately, the reasoning for recommending the option that sees the centre's closure as approved in the decision is that there is no longer a market failure to justify the use of public funds in the form of a subsidy. There is more provision of suitable serviced office space in the locality and surrounding market towns, while further future provision is set to be developed. Furthermore, the investment necessary to improve the premises to suit the operation and expected rental levels does not provide a viable operating model and would simply necessitate continued subsidy and use of public funds for the centre. Conversely, as you've heard repeatedly today, there is a lack of supply of industrial accommodation in Midsummer Norton. And so our recommendation in the decision is that essentially this unit, this property, is put to the market for the market to ultimately determine how the market wishes now to use this property. There is no longer a market failure that requires the use of at least £25,000 of public subsidy, or public funds every year to subsidise a very small number of businesses using the centre. And with that in mind, I would close my comments on this particular topic.
Thank you, Councillor Davis. Councillor Blackburn, you have 5 minutes for your closing statement. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Business West, by its very nature, offered a particular business model for this centre 20 years ago. They wanted a subsidy to then run it to satisfy and overcome a market failure that the Council obviously recognised and supported. But a decision taken in 2018, without scrutiny, I might add, because I can't see it anywhere, to take back and run that premises ourselves. If the stated aim at that time was to do away with the need for subsidy, that would have been great, because I agree, we should not be needing to subsidise businesses in this type of facility. But actually, what we've done in 5 years is regularised leases. That's a new one on me, but effectively, we've run the centre down to 2 tenants. We've given no opportunity for new businesses to use this facility. And there's no real data in front of us to say that these surrounding market towns really have got the provision that we believe this centre was already providing and providing well. There are plenty of centres like this being run by operators who do not expect a subsidy. They will take that building on and they'll run it. Business West happen to have a particular model. I see the best outcome that's been mentioned really comes back to Councillor Jackson's comments earlier about best outcome is from a financial perspective. It's selling the family silver, but it's 5-year manipulated programme. And I don't think we've really had this on the table to look at and be viable about what those alternatives should and could have been to make this an unsubsidised but viable business location for many businesses in the Somer Valley. So I find it incredibly sad that we're this far down the line before we're putting our cards on the table and saying what's really been going on here. Because 5 years worth of let's not bring a tenant in because we're regularising leases, it is in my mind not very good at all. I appreciate, as panel members, you've seen financial statements that I've never seen. I'm just here with the call-in, so I can't even scrutinise those figures and give any alternative or say, hang on a minute, if we'd have seen this 2 years ago, couldn't we have been looking at this in a different way? I talk about decisions made in haste and repenting at leisure. Nobody wants this to be subsidised ongoing. I absolutely agree, and for a Cabinet member in his summing up, I completely agree. There are 8,000 businesses in this authority's area that all need our support. and that the funds are thin and they've got to spread widely. But I'm not sure that's the objective here, and that's really unfortunate. I'm just wanted to make sure this call-in publicised the fact that actually this has been a 5-year plan to sell the family silver, or add to. Let's look at it for a best outcome for us, and I'm not sure that's the best outcome for the Soma Valley and the business opportunities that this type of centre should provide. So from a summing up point of view, hopefully I've just covered how I feel, and I hear so many people expressing that to me as I came up with this call and just said, it's wrong.
Thank you, Councillor Blackburn. I'm going to move to the debate with the panel. Can I please just remind you that we have a number of options for decisions, so we can dismiss the call-in, we can refer the decision back to the decision-making personal body for reconsideration, but we should set out in writing the nature of the concerns, or we can refer the matter back to the council itself to undertake the role of the panel, but obviously the ultimate decision still will remain with the original decision maker. Would anybody like to speak first? Councillor McPhee. So, Councillor McPhee, are you proposing a motion to dismiss the call-in?
It's preliminary, but because I'm the first one, but I'm willing to do that at a future point.
Does anybody else want to speak? Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, so it seems that everybody accepts that we shouldn't be subsidising this. I think everybody seems to agree with that. The only thing we're debating is whether it's possible to run it without a subsidy. We have numbers in front of us in the exempt document that seem to say it isn't. Those four options, all of the options that aren't option 3 require us to do something that would spend money on it on an ongoing basis. So the only question then is there an alternative option? And the only thing I've heard floated as an alternative option is to find a management company that don't require a subsidy to take it on. That seems to be the only option that's been suggested from anybody that isn't on the list. So I guess if we were going to request it was reconsidered, the only thing we can ask for it to be reconsidered about is have you considered the option of trying to find a management company that will do it without a subsidy? I have no idea how realistic that is. Councillor Blackburn is asserting it is realistic. I have no knowledge of the market in that area to be able to assess that. But it seems to me that that's the only. If we're going to say that it needs running without a subsidy, that's the only thing that we could suggest.
Councillor Davis, you wanted to make us.
Yeah, I think we're in a situation where we've gone too far down the road in some ways, and I think it's just been said, we should have been looking at that option possibly 2 or 3 years ago, where it would have been more realistic or I don't know if easy is not the word I really want to use, but more realistic to do that then. I do feel we've spent, from 2018, not necessarily making all the right moves, and we've ended up in a situation which I think we all agree we don't want it to be subsidised. We understood why it was subsidised back in 2004 when it started and so on. But I think we're in a situation now, I'm not sure that we can backtrack, and therefore if we dismiss it, that's, there we are. I am confused, if you like, as to where we can actually go, because I do think that the option that's just been suggested, maybe we should have looked at something else, should have been there, but I wonder if it's now too late to do that, so I just will listen a bit further to the debate, but I'm just wondering if we're too late to change other than where we are at the moment.
Does anybody else want to... Councillor Walker.
Option 3. I agree with most of it, office space, but industrial warehouse, Walton Biddy moved out of Midsummer One because the infrastructure was not right for warehousing and their heavy lorries. So again, on a small business park like this, I don't think industrial and warehouse accommodation would be right.
Okay, does anybody else want to make a statement? Councillor McCabe.
I find it very difficult to... I'm going to find this very difficult to put into words without referring to the restricted document.
So do we need to go into exempt session?
I have a question that I would need to go into exempt session for.
Can I go into exempt?
Yeah, if you feel you're going to disclose exempt information, you need to invite the panel to make the resolution, Chair.
Yes, so I'm going to... the exempt paragraph is that having been satisfied that the public interest would be better served by not disclosing relevant information in accordance with the provisions of section 100A(4) of the Local Government Act 1972, the public be excluded for the meeting for the following items of business, and the reporting of the meeting be prevented under section 100A(5)(a) because of the likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act as amended. May I please have a mover? Councillor McCabe, and a seconder, Councillor Davis. All those in favour? Unanimous. So I don't need to remove any of the...
No.
We could stay here as long as the webcast is...
Yeah,
it's stopped.
The webcast needs to stop.
Right, everybody. Thank you very much for your patience, and welcome back to the webcast. Would anybody on the panel like to speak? Councillor McPhee.
I was going to propose a motion to dismiss the call-in.
Okay, do we have a seconder? That's Councillor McCabe. And for the other panel members, are you in agreement?
You're asking for a vote, are you?
Dismiss. Yes, I'm asking for the vote to dismiss the call-in. Okay. Against? And abstain? No, Sally voted. Councillor Davis, sorry, voted for, didn't she? Just clarify, yeah. Right, so thank you very much, everybody, and the motion is carried to dismiss the calling. Thank you very much for your time, and hopefully for the final time, I will say goodbye as chair. And thank you, everybody, for your contributions. It's much appreciated.
We were talking about WECA scrutiny today. This is one of the ones we should have picked up